Serving the Inland Empire and desert communities. This is KMET, Manning, Beaumont, Redlands, and Palm Springs, 1490 AM.
From ABC News, I'm Scott Goldberg. Protesters are gathering in Chicago with signs that say things like "Stop Racist Police Behavior," demonstrating for a second day in a row after police released video of the shooting leading up to the death last week of 18-year-old Paul O'Neill. Eddie Johnson is the police superintendent.
A lot of people are upset by what they saw, and quite honestly, they have a right to be upset.
More on that video from ABC's Alex Perez.
These tense moments from 9 body cam and dash cam videos are a first look at how things unfolded July 28th when Chicago police fatally shot the 18-year-old car robbery suspect. Missing from these images, body cam footage of the fatal shot being fired. Authorities say that camera was not recording and are now investigating why. O'Neill died shortly after the shooting. He was unarmed.
3 officers were stripped of their police powers immediately after the shooting. In Belgium today, police are calling it a likely terror attack when a man with a machete injured 2 officers outside a police station in the city of Charleroi. He was yelling, "God is great," in Arabic. A 3rd officer shot and killed him. In France, authorities say a deadly fire last night appears to be an accident.
A devastating fire during a birthday party at a bar in the northern French city of Rouen has killed over a dozen people and injured 6. Candles on a birthday cake are believed to have ignited the flames. An investigation is now underway, but France's interior minister was quick to announce that terrorism has been ruled out.
ABC's Jennifer Eccleston at the foreign desk. At the Olympics in Rio, an emotional day for an athlete on the refugee team.
Her name is Yursa Mardini. She and her sister helped to save 20 people when they jumped from their tiny sinking boat in the Aegean Sea and pushed it to land. Not surprisingly, she entered the Olympics as a swimmer and won her first heat in the 100-meter butterfly. But her time of 1 minute 9.21 seconds put her in 41st place. Only the top 16 swimmers move on to the semifinals. Jim Ryan, ABC News at the Rio Olympics.
You're listening to ABC News.
Here's a special message for those of you who owe the IRS at least $10,000 or more in back taxes. The IRS has special programs in place that could eliminate or reduce your tax debt by thousands of dollars. With a call to National Tax Helpline, you can stop the wage garnishments, levies, and tax liens now. Once you've qualified and enrolled, the IRS will stop all the collection activities against you. These unique programs have been allocated to help the economy and significantly reduce or eliminate your tax burden. The IRS is currently accepting reduced settlements and other favorable programs. You may qualify for substantial savings, so get the help you need. If you owe the IRS $10,000 or more, call now for free information and to see if you qualify. Take down the number now for the Tax Helpline, 800-295-4183. That's 800-295-4183 for free information. 800-295-4183. That's 800-295-4183.
The mayor of Stockton, California, is insisting he did nothing wrong. Prosecutors say there's a recording on his cell phone that shows Anthony Silva providing alcohol to 4 young adults and to one 16-year-old and playing strip poker with them at summer camp last year. Silva says,
"Everyone there was 18 years old. Number 2, I never, ever, ever, ever endangered a child. Ever. Number 3, I never provided alcohol to anyone. And I certainly did not secretly record anyone."
He's up for re-election as mayor and said this is all part of a smear campaign. FBI Director James Comey says there is a problem at his agency.
We have a crisis in the FBI today. 83% of our special agents are white. And that number has been growing steadily, slowly but steadily. And I got no problem with white people, especially tall, awkward, male white people. But we are less effective, and dangerously so.
Comey speaking last night in San Francisco. He said they must hire more diverse special agents. Police in Santa Fe, New Mexico say a woman who was too drunk to drive handed the keys to her 13-year-old grandson, and he also might have been drinking. Grandma's been charged with child abuse and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, also having an open container in the car. The 13-year-old is facing a charge of aggravated DWI for failing to perform a field sobriety test. This is ABC News.
Is my kid in the right car seat? I guess she is.
There are probably rules on when to move up to a booster seat, aren't there?
Rear-facing, forward-facing. I think I have it right.
Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Are your children in the right car seat for their age and size? Don't think you know. Know you know. Go to safercar.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Scott Goldberg, ABC News.
From the KMET Weather Center for Beaumont and the Pass area for this afternoon, we can expect plenty of sunshine. Our high 94 will have winds to 20 miles an hour. It'll be clear tonight, a bit breezy, although 68 with winds to 25 miles an hour. Sunday should be sunny with a high of 93 with winds to 25 miles an hour. We'll have a sunny Monday with a high of 94. For the Inland Empire this afternoon, we'll have sunny skies at a high of 83. For Palm Springs, it'll be sunny with a high of 104. I'm Rod Tanner for Smart Talk 1490 KMET.
Don't miss our next meeting of the Banning Beaumont Cherry Valley Tea Party. We will be featuring Senator Jeff Stone. Jeff Stone running for the 36th Congressional District. We'll also have Douglas V. Gibbs, our constitutional expert and author, on his third class of our Constitution. We'll be talking about the 3/5 clause. August 11th at 5 p.m. at the Farms House Restaurant in Banning. See you then.
The following is a paid program. Views and claims expressed are those of the program producer and are not endorsed by this station. Opinions expressed are not necessarily those of radio station KMET, its management, employees, or affiliates.
It's time for Constitutional Radio on KMET 1490 AM. I am Douglas V. Gibbs, your host. DouglasVGibbs.com. If you want to call in, talk to Alex and I, 922-3532. That's a 951 area code, 922-3532. And it's great to be back in the studio. Last Saturday got kind of ugly. Our discussion was exactly the reason James Madison was against the creation of a Bill of Rights. He knew it would muddy the waters. And today I have my resources on hand. So to back up what I was trying to say last week about the Bill of Rights and the question of jurisdiction, as always, the guy to my right, always to my right, Mr. Alex.
Muddy Waters, wasn't he a jazz musician back in the 30s?
Muddy Water. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
I knew you'd bring him up sooner or later.
If you missed the program, you can always check out the podcast at KMET1490am.com. Or if you're out of the area, there's no way you can get your radio to tune in the show live, KMET1490am.com. Or you can get the phone app, put it on your phone. It's a great app. The moment you turn it on, it just starts playing. You don't have to be technologically advanced. Just if you got a smartphone, get the KMET app on your phone. Go to KMET1490am.com to get the app. Okay, you ready to roll?
I was born ready.
You're born ready. Okay, real quick, last night I was at the Murrieta Temecula Republican Assembly meeting in Temecula by the Temecula City Hall. I'm a member of that group, a member of the board, matter of fact, California Republican Assembly, and the speaker was a guy named Charles Wiley. Charles Wiley, he's a World War II veteran in his 90s, and he was a journalist. I shouldn't say was, I guess, sort of like a Marine, kind of always are. Unless
you're Dan Rather.
Unless you're Dan Rather, right. I'd rather not have Rather. He's talking about Vietnam and how a lot of what we've been taught, what's in our textbooks and all this other noise, is a bunch of nonsense. And it was pretty fascinating. I don't have his website handy with me. I'll put it on the web, put it on politicalpistachio.com later. So I invited him to be our guest next Saturday, and he gave me a verbal confirmation. And then he was all jazzed when he heard my co-host is a Purple Heart Vietnam veteran. So. Yeah, I think you and Mr. Wiley will get along just fine, Alex.
One of my favorite people just died. He was a ranger in the Pacific.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. His grandkid was one of my tutoring students.
Oh, no kidding. Well, my condolences to the family, and
he lived a full life, 94 years old. He saw everything, did everything, and never disgraced himself.
So, like with Mr. Wiley, you're just a young whippersnapper.
I'm a kid.
Just a kid. I'm practically still in the womb at that point. All right. Here we are. Last Saturday got ugly. Okay. You ready to talk about the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, but I'm like a guy with a knife going to a gunfight.
This is true. This is true. All right. Bill of Rights originally intended to only apply to the federal government. That was the argument last week, and I want to make sure you understand this. I'm not saying that the states can freely jump all of your rights. Okay. Your rights are yours, God-given, inherent. They belong to you. However, the document, the Constitution of the United States, was not written regarding states. It was written regarding the federal government. It was written to establish this federal government. The Bill of Rights was added later because the anti-federalists were afraid that the mere 7 articles that were there with the enumerated responsibilities, enumerated express powers, was not enough to make sure the federal government kept its hands off of our rights. Among the folks that argued against the Bill of Rights was James Madison. James Madison argued it would muddy the waters. The federal government already doesn't have the authority on something. If you mention it in a Bill of Rights, it could be misconstrued to either be partially their power or even be applied to the states. That was part of his argument. Now, most of the people who argue with me about if the Bill of Rights was originally intended to apply to the federal government or not, like our guest Tom last week, who's arguing with me about it, their argument is based on what the Constitution in their mind should be, not on what it is. And it is and was written a certain way for a reason. There is a reason behind this, and it's not sinister. It's not because your rights can be stomped on by the states or anything like that, but we'll get to that. And be honest, there simply exists no founding era evidence that Congress or the state ratifiers intended for the protections included in the Bill of Rights to bind state governments. In fact, doing so would essentially create a federal veto over state laws, a massive expansion of central government authority, the exact opposite of the stated purpose of including a Bill of Rights. That's the reason why I get on to people when they talk about the federal government being there to guarantee their rights. You don't want the federal government there to guarantee your rights, because if they're there to guarantee your rights, that means that they can step in and dictate to the states what they can and can't do regarding your rights. What the states do, that's up to you as a citizen of that state. Now, most people, let's get back to whether or not the Bill of Rights was originally intended to apply to the federal government. And one of the things I had forgot to mention last week, and it's partly because I was in the heat of battle and just didn't think of it, is a lot of people don't realize that the Bill of Rights actually has a preamble. Matter of fact, if you pull out your pocket Constitution, and I'll get one for Alex right here. If you look at your pocket Constitution, preamble to the Bill of Rights is in there, or at least in the ones that I have from the National Center for Constitutional Studies, nccs.net, which is where I get my pocket constitutions. Those are the pocket constitutions with a picture of George Washington on the front, and and then like the background of the Constitution itself. And the preamble, when you read the preamble to the Bill of Rights, which went along with the Bill of Rights, it actually makes the purpose of the Bill of Rights very clear. Okay, here's how it reads. The conventions of a number of the states, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficial ends of its institution. The words its powers clearly refer back to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights was intended to prevent misconstruction or abuse, quote unquote, of the Constitution's powers as exercised through the government, singular. It's referring back to the federal government. Notice the word government is not plural. The Bill of Rights makes no mention of state governments. In fact, the state ratifying conventions had no intention of restricting their own state powers. They already had state constitutions to do that. And also, the idea of the creation of the federal government was to handle external issues, not to even get involved internally at all. Also, you got to remember, because this is a social contract, and the states were the authors of this, they didn't write it to give the federal government any chance to restrict them in any way, nor to restrict themselves or prohibit themselves from anything unless it was absolutely necessary to keep the states from interfering with the federal government trying to do its job regarding external issues. Now imagine if somebody, I went to the 10thamendmentcenter.com, 10thamendmentcenter.com, and found this particular paragraph that I thought was very good. Here's what it says. Imagine if someone from England went before a British court and argued that the Second Amendment gave him the right to own a gun. The judge would laugh him out of the courtroom. The Bill of Rights does not govern in England, despite the fact that an Englishman does have an unalienable right of self-defense. Everybody on this planet has the right to keep and bear arms. But the Bill of Rights does not prohibit the federal government from infringing upon the Englishman's right. England exists in a separate political sphere. A state is no different. Although it has entered a union with the other states as defined by the Constitution, it remains an independent political society, giving up only the powers delegated. Absent specific delegation of power of the federal government authorizing to the state, the police states, and force them to abide by its understanding of rights, the power simply does not exist. Remember, the Constitution is all about a delegation of power. And you had mentioned last Saturday, Alex, that, well, it's mentioned it in the Constitution, the Second Amendment, but it's not a delegation of power. It's a warning not to infringe upon it to the federal government. Now, Chief Justice John Marshall, who I'm not a big fan of, John Marshall was a nationalist. However, he was around at the time of the writing of the Constitution. He understood its original intent. In fact, before he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he was John Adams, Secretary of State. John Adams being the second president under the Constitution. And he explained the limits of the Bill of Rights quite well, in his opinion, in Barron versus Baltimore. Here's what John Marshall wrote. Chief Justice John Marshall, in his opinion, in Barron versus Baltimore. The Constitution was ordained and established by the people of the United States for themselves, for their own government, and not for the government of the individual states. Each state established a constitution for itself, and in that constitution provided such limitations or restrictions on the powers of its particular government as its judgment dictated. The people of the United States framed such a government for the United States as they supposed best adapted to their situation and best calculated to promote their interests. The powers they conferred on this government were to be exercised by itself, and the limitations on power, if expressed in general terms, are naturally and we think necessarily applicable to the government created by the instrument. They are limitations of power granted in the instrument itself, not of distinct governments framed by different persons or for different purposes. If these propositions be correct, the Fifth Amendment must be understood as restraining the power of the general government, not as applicable to the states. In their several constitutions, they have imposed such restrictions on their respective governments, as their own wisdom suggested, such as they deemed most proper for themselves. It is a subject on which they judge exclusively and with which others interfere no further than they are supposed to have a common interest. One of the things that I mentioned last Saturday was that after the ratification of the Bill of Rights, Constitution of the Bill of Rights, Constitution 1788, a year later is when it was finished to be ratified. The Bill of Rights was ratified in 1791. The persons involved with the writing and the ratification of these documents, being the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, then went to their states to ensure that their state constitutions, if they had one, added language similar. If they didn't have a state constitution, they began to push for state constitutions, once again with similar language. If the Bill of Rights applied to the states, why would they then ask for similar language in their state constitutions? State constitutions for the states, federal constitutions for the federal government. Now, James Madison, when he introduced the Bill of Rights to Congress, He proposed that an equal right of conscience, freedom of the press, and the right to a trial by jury should also apply to states. He actually wanted, remember, James Madison started as a nationalist. He actually felt it was necessary that these be applied to the states as well. Here now is the paragraph from that. I wish also in revising the Constitution we may throw into that section which interdicts the abuse of certain powers in the state legislatures some other provisions of equal if not greater importance than those already made. The words no state shall pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, etc. were wise and proper restrictions in the Constitution. I think there is more danger of these powers being abused by the state governments than by the government of the United States. The same may be said of other powers which they possess, if not controlled by the general principles. That laws are unconstitutional, which infringe the rights of the community. I should therefore wish to extend this interdiction and add, as I have stated in the fifth resolution, that no state shall violate the equal right of conscience, freedom of the press, or trial by a jury in criminal cases, because it is proper that every government should be disarmed of powers which trench upon those particular rights. Congress explicitly rejected applying those particular amendments to the states, making it abundantly clear that the Bill of Rights was only intended to limit federal power. Now, even the liberal left historians will actually agree with this. Their argument is not that the Bill of Rights was originally intended to apply to the federal government. Their argument is that the 14th Amendment changed all that and incorporated the protections included in the Bill of Rights on the state governments, which I argue it really doesn't. And also, if we do that, it opens up Pandora's box. It allows the federal government's nose in the tent, so to speak. A great example, one I brought up last week, I'll bring it up again, was the McDonald v. Chicago case over gun rights, where Chicago had banned guns. And I'll explain it after the break.
You got a dent in your door, a scratch in your fender, or a scratch in your door and a dent in your fender. If you need auto detailing, if you need fire shooting decals on the side of your car, if you need a rally stripe right down the middle of your hardtop, I don't care what it is. The Patriots at AllStar Collision are the place you want to go. They're the only place to go. 522 Railroad Street in Corona. Web address allstarci.com to see all that they do and what they're all about. Phone number 951-279-9161. AllStar Collision, the kings of wreck and roll.
Hi, this is Ed Hoffman, President Wholesale Capital Corporation, your direct mortgage lender. Real estate prices are still low, which means now's the time to buy your next home before they go up. Whether it's a home to live in, a vacation house, or an investment property, we can meet your mortgage financing needs to help you realize the next phase of your American dream. At Wholesale Capital Corporation, we make sure you get a loan that you can afford with terms that work for you. Wholesale Capital welcomes FHA buyers, conventional buyers, jumbo loan buyers, and we proudly help the U.S. military veterans take advantage of the zero down payment VA loan program. Nobody treats veterans better than Wholesale Capital Corporation. Seniors, if you're interested in creating an additional stream of income or just making your mortgage payment go away with a reverse mortgage, Wholesale Capital would love to help you. To speak with a loan officer who has your best interests in mind, call Wholesale Capital at 855-640-2020. That's area code 855-640-2020. Wholesale Capital Corporation, where we can close.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Our records indicate you've been lied to. Welcome to the truth. Douglas V. Gibbs.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
The The spirit of Paul Revere is alive and well and broadcasting on KMET AM 1490. Constitutionalist Douglas V. Gibbs hosts a roundtable of local citizens through local, state, and national issues every Saturday at 8 a.m. Thomas Jefferson said, "We in America do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate." So, participate. Listen to Conservative Voice Radio every Saturday at 8 a.m. and join Paul Revere's modern Ride for Liberty.
What's your constitutional IQ? Your quest to learn the Constitution can be fun for the whole family. Learn about the Constitution as you play the Constitution Quest board game. Learn more at constitutionquest.com.
And now, back to our program.
Welcome back to Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. I have Alex Ferguson by my side, as always, right here. If you want to call in, you want to discuss what we are talking about, 951-922-3532. If you're listening to the podcast and you missed it live, that's no problem. You can not only catch the podcast, but also the video winds up on YouTube. If you want to check out YouTube videos of my radio program, I started putting them on last few weeks. Go to youtube.com/Douglas V. Gibbs. All right. Get back to our discussion. Now, when we were talking about the Bill of Rights last week, the Second Amendment got into the conversation. And this is where Alex really became concerned. And he said, hey, okay, First Amendment says Congress should make no law, but I don't see anything, saying that Second Amendment's directly the federal government. And there was actually questions about that before the Bill of Rights. George Mason was one of the anti-federalists that most pushed for a Bill of Rights. He was one of the loudest voices for a Bill of Rights, anti-federalists. Him and Samuel Adams. I'm sure you met them in your lifetime, and no, I'm kidding, Alex.
Couldn't hold their liquor.
Couldn't hold their liquor. But I'm sure you've heard of Samuel Adams, and not the beer, the man, and George Mason, right?
Somewhere in my reading of comic books, I must have come across it. Yes.
Comic books?
Well, that's the implication, I think.
Well, I figure you walk through the grass with him. I mean, you're.
Well, shall I endeavor to clarify my position here, or is
Yeah, but let me provide just a little bit more information before you do. Let me destroy the bridge you want to cross first, okay? All right. Okay, so there was concern during the ratification of the Constitution because there was no mention of guns in the Constitution. And the attitude of James Madison was, well, yeah, if it's absent, federal government doesn't have the authority. So if there's no authority given to the federal government regarding guns, then they have no authority to have any laws regarding guns. What about the militia? Why, the militia is mentioned in the Constitution, and so on and so forth. And this question was asked, in the Virginia Ratifying Convention in 1788, and George Mason, interestingly enough, was the one to respond, and he says, I ask, sir, what is the militia? It is the whole people. To disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them. So they understood the necessity of being an armed public, the importance of it in order to remain a free society. And with all the talk about gun control nowadays, I mean, I suppose it's easy to fall victim to the lies of the liberal left. The language of the Second Amendment, though, is pretty clear. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The amendment was specifically written with the federal government in mind. It ends with the words shall not be infringed. That means that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be restricted in any way by the federal government. That would make all federal gun regulations unconstitutional. If states want to place limitations on gun ownership, such as not allowing felons or children or the mentally handicapped to possess firearms, that is up to each state. Meaning it's up to you as citizens through your state government to place that kind of legislation on the books. Now, in the middle of that amendment, being necessary to secure a free state, this is very curious language, for we know the security of the states against foreign invasion is already in place through the United States military. Also notice that the word state is capitalized. A free state does not mean a free government. It means free state. Free New York, free Massachusetts, free Virginia, and so forth. The security of the states against foreign invaders is not being addressed here. So the next question should be, if the people need to be armed for the security of their states, against what invader are they talking about? The answer is from within. The Second Amendment is necessary to protect the citizens and provide the security of their free state against a tyrannical federal government. The people's right to be armed is specifically to keep at bay a tyrannical federal government should such a need arise. And tyranny takes many forms, and the British was only one example. Now, we ask getting back to George Mason, who asked, who is the militia? Well, the United States Code, Title 10, Chapter 13, Section 311, actually defines the militia. There is, according to the United States government, there is an organized militia and an unorganized militia. Guess who the unorganized militia is, my friend?
Me.
You, me, our engineer Sean, the listeners. That's the unorganized militia.
So if the Constitution says militia, then they must mean all the people.
Right. Although the way the code in the U.S. government book is written, there's age limits and things like that. But I guarantee you, if all hell broke loose, there would be no age limit to who's willing to take arms. But that's beside the point. Now, I'm going to go down a little bit further now to McDonald v. Chicago, 2010.
Do we have time?
Yeah. It challenged the city of Chicago's ban on handguns. It brought to the surface the debate over whether or not the Second Amendment only applies to the federal government. The 5-4 decision of the McDonald v. Chicago case by the U.S. Supreme Court holds that the Second Amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms in all cities and states. And this was the courts changing the original intent of the Constitution with their ruling. My first question is, do the courts have authority to change the Constitution? No. Secondly, when you think about it, people contacted me after that case, said, "Hey, Doug, it's a win for gun rights." I said, "No, think about it. A federal court, Supreme Court, just dictated to a city what it can or can't do regarding your gun rights. On the surface, it may seem like a good thing because they told Chicago it could not ban handguns. But think about it. A federal court, because they think it's their job to guarantee you your rights, dictated to a city what it can or can't do regarding your gun rights. Now, I was involved last February in a campaign to work on these textbooks and see if we could fix them. And in the textbook for our kids, here's what it says about the Second Amendment. This is what the left says. The people have a right to keep and bear arms if they are a member of an approved militia, i.e. the police, the military, so forth. Now, if you're going to let them stick their nose into the tent, open Pandora's box of dictating to cities and states regarding gun rights, because you think the Second Amendment applies to states as well, and the federal government's there to guarantee it, and then the federal government changes the definition to a collective right rather than an individual right. Heller versus Washington, D.C. right now has it as an individual right. Then you're opening up the door for some very dangerous federal intrusion. Okay, the floor is yours, Alex.
Oh, so it is a discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was beginning to wonder. I have a kind of a English major's approach to this, and that is that I have an opinion. I'm dealing with an extremely ambiguous subject. My feeling is that what you're talking about is a distinction without a difference. You say that the federal government guaranteed that it would not abuse its powers in these ways.
No, I said that the states wrote a constitution to tell the federal government, don't interfere.
Fine. There are people in these states. The state is not a person. The state is an institution. The people whose freedom is being challenged, in my opinion, are the people.
Right.
All of them. To me, if I have a natural God-given right to keep and bear arms and defend myself, then I have a natural God-given right to keep and bear arms to defend myself.
Yes, you do.
And when the federal government says in the Second Amendment, not the 10th, not the 20th, the Second Amendment.
Federal government doesn't say that. The Second Amendment written by the states
that
does.
I have a right to keep and bear arms, then I take that at face value.
You have a right to keep and bear arms. That right belongs to you no matter who the government is.
But I'm saying that for a city to decide that I don't have that right,
then they were acting
against.
And
to violate that right, that city is in violation of humanity.
Yeah, and you're right. They were not in violation of the Second Amendment. They were in violation of your natural right to keep and bear arms.
Now, the Second Amendment, the reason for that, in my opinion, is to protect the right that I already have.
From the federal government.
From the federal government. And anybody else that wants to tell me that I don't have a natural God-given right. I do.
The document for anybody else is the state constitution.
The state can go screw itself as far as I'm concerned because they don't have the power to take away my natural God-given right.
I agree.
And therefore, all of this discussion is pointless.
You're exactly right in everything you said. It's the bone of contention here is not whether or not you have that right at the state level. It is not whether or not the state should be able or a city should be able to stomp on that right. That's your right. You have that natural right and it belongs to you. There's no bone of contention there. When the city of Chicago banned handguns, that was a violation of the natural rights of the people of that city.
As guaranteed by the Constitution.
Not guaranteed by the Constitution. Once again, hang on here now. We're talking about, number one, we're talking about jurisdiction. Number two, you got to be careful here. Because if it is guaranteed by the Constitution, who guarantees it? Federal government? Well, now you've just given them an open door to dictate to the states on these issues. That's why the Founding Fathers did not apply the Bill of Rights to states. They expected the people to make sure that same kind of language was in their state constitutions.
There is no reason on earth why the 10 Amendments, Bill of Rights, should not be enforced upon the states.
It's dangerous because it gives the federal government the in that it needs to dictate to the states and become a tyrannical government.
To the amendment. The amendments are what they are, and they are legal, and they are proper, and they are right.
And
so there's no reason in the world not to enforce them upon the states.
Hang on a second.
If you were to say that the states then all of a sudden have a right to violate those rights.
That is not what is being said.
That's what
is
being
said.
What is being said
is
a distinction without a difference.
What is being said is those rights are natural. The states are not supposed to violate those rights. But their document that tells them that is a different document. It's the state constitutions.
Did the state constitutions that allowed alcohol during Prohibition, did they have the power to legalize?
An amendment which specifically stated, see, they wrote that very specifically to apply it to the states. That's the reason why that amendment did apply to the states. But notice the federal government realized an amendment was needed. They couldn't just impose it on the states without an amendment. But the Bill of Rights, okay, back up. Let's settle down. Back up first.
I'm calm.
First, let's understand. I read you founding documents by the Founding Fathers that said the Bill of Rights was only supposed to apply to the federal government originally, and every historian, and I'm not talking about knuckleheads like Tom, I'm talking about people who actually deeply studied this, and they are learned people, conservative or liberal, agree on this because the language is clear. that it originally was intended only to apply to the federal government. Now, the ones who try to apply it to the states, the people in history who have tried to apply it to states are liberals and socialists. Does that not throw up red flags for you?
I have an opinion that my natural God-given rights may not be violated.
Yeah, and you're right.
And therefore, if the state violates the right, they're wrong.
And you are correct on that.
And that's all I have to worry about.
And you're correct on what you just said.
These technical ins and outs end up in producing a situation where a city can violate my rights. That's what you've created. You've created a situation.
No.
You just told me that the city of Chicago should have the right to write a law.
That is not what I said.
To write a law that says that I can't have a gun.
That is not what I said.
You said that.
No, I did not say that. You're not listening.
I'm listening very carefully.
Okay. You have a natural right to keep and bear arms. No government, no city, no state, no federal government has the right to infringe upon that. Okay? It is not the federal government's job to guarantee that a state doesn't violate that right. The Second Amendment.
I don't see why my federal government doesn't have the right to protect my rights.
Because, well, first of all, because they were seen as the potential enemy. You really want to hire the enemy to protect your rights?
As long as they stay within the simple wording of the Constitution.
But see, if they guarantee that, then now they start dictating to a city, and that means they can dictate the opposite later.
That is speculation.
No, it's not speculation. That's what the Founding Fathers said originally. Now, let's back up.
You just said that the federal government did not have a right to stop Chicago from violating my rights.
Then who does have the right to stop the city from doing it?
I'm saying that...
well, who should do it? If I'm right and the federal government doesn't have the authority, who should do it then? Whose responsibility is it?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Now let's back up again.
I know I'm not going to get to my poem or my book review.
Not at this rate.
Sure.
But this is good for the listeners. I think they're
about
learning.
them?
We want them to learn. All right.
I got a debate going on.
The right to keep and bear arms is a right, no matter what. It's God-given. The right to keep and bear arms belongs to you. No city, no state, no federal government has the right to betray that right. Shall not be infringed does apply from a natural rights point of view. That is not the argument. The argument is not that I think that the city or state should be able to stomp on your rights. I'm not saying that.
But that's what happens when we follow your prescription.
Listen. Any government's going to stomp on your rights if they think that they can.
If I can convince them that it's illegal.
But see, you just answered the question I asked earlier. I said if the federal government can't guarantee, you're not supposed to guarantee the Second Amendment to the states or the cities, whose job is it? And what'd you just say? Well, not if I can help. Well, yeah, it's your job, in other words, at the city level. Because if you give the federal government the opportunity to guarantee the rights, that gives them the foot in the door to become tyrannical and dictate to the cities and states.
Horse feathers.
Therefore, the Bill of Rights was written to apply to the federal government. Your state constitutions apply to the states and the cities. They are separate governments with separate documents. Now, you still have natural right, though, to keep and bear arms. We're going to have to go to break.
Acknowledging the power of the federal government to protect my rights is not a way to open the door to slavery.
Their job is not to protect your rights. Their job is to keep their hands off your rights.
And I'm saying that if somebody else comes along and violates my rights...
Then do something about it.
I personally, as a citizen of the state, have to fight with my state. I can't just say... The federal government told me.
Federal government's the potential enemy.
Look,
really?
We're going to have to agree.
Would you like to hire Russia to tell the federal government how to treat you?
Russia.
Well, I mean, that's how dangerous federal government could be.
We're talking about speculative nonsense. I'm saying what we have is an irreparable difference of opinion. I think we ought to just say we agree to disagree and let me do my poem.
Now, well, you're disagreeing with the Founding Fathers, too, but when we come back, we'll see if we can hear that poem or not. We'll be right back.
The true patriots of AllStar Collision have been proudly serving the Inland Empire for over 20 years. Built on honesty, integrity, quality, and old-fashioned customer service, we offer lifetime warranties for our work, and every vehicle serviced by AllStar Collision is washed, detailed, the headlights polished, fluids are checked and topped off, safety checked, and returned in showroom condition. We offer free estimates, are approved by major insurance companies, and accept all claims for all cars and trucks. We use computerized frame straightening to factory specifications, offer fiberglass body repair and paint, free local pickup and delivery, and after-hours towing. Mention this radio program at drop-off and receive $100 off or a free rental car for up to 5 days during your repair. Visit us at allstarci.com or at 522 Railroad Street in Corona. Call us at 951-279-9161. We are the kings of wreck and roll.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Tired of the lies? Come here for the truth. Douglas V. Gibbs.
Help me fight the good fight. This radio program is funded by advertising dollars. So, if you are a business, add Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs to your business portfolio. If you are a listener, become a patron of the business's advertising on this program. Without advertising, your weekend dose of truth ends. With more advertising, Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs grows, and we will be on the way to win the battle to restore the Republic. To learn more, email us at constitutionspeaker@yahoo.com or visit douglasvgibbs.com.
Hi, this is Ed Hoffman, President Wholesale Capital Corporation, your direct mortgage lender. Real estate prices are still low, which means now's the time to buy your next home before they go up. Whether it's a home to live in, a vacation house, or an investment property, we can meet your mortgage financing needs to help you realize the next phase of your American dream. At Wholesale Capital Corporation, we make sure you get a loan that you can afford with terms that work for you. Wholesale Capital welcomes FHA buyers, conventional buyers, jumbo loan buyers, and we proudly help the U.S. military veterans take advantage of the zero down payment VA loan program. Nobody treats veterans better than Wholesale Capital Corporation. Seniors, if you're interested in creating an additional stream of income or just making your mortgage payment go away with a reverse mortgage, Wholesale Capital would love to help you. To speak with a loan officer who has your best interests in mind, call Wholesale Capital at 855-640-2020. That's area code 855-640-2020. Wholesale Capital Corporation, where we can close.
And now, back to our program.
And welcome back, Constitution Radio, right here on KMET 1490 AM. And we have Alex with this poem ready to roll. He decided he's going to agree to disagree. I told him off mic that it's a wonderful country. It's a free country. And the wonderful thing about a free country is people are free to be mistaken. All right.
Yeah, I have a poem and a beginning of a discussion on...
And we still have three issues to talk about that are in the news,
fine.
too, so
I'll
remember
just do
that.
the poem, and next week you give me half the show for my issue.
No, you could do both, but just remember we also have to squeeze in these three issues.
Okay. This thing is what I heard. I read in an article the other day somebody had written a prose poem, some supposedly great poet in L.A. I don't believe in prose poems, but for lack of a better term, that's what this is. It's called The Man Behind the Myth. Liberal compassion is legendary, not because liberalism is inherently compassionate, but rather because legend is inherently mythic. Therefore, the compassionate liberal constitutes something of a political transvestite. He flaunts his compassion. He parades it around in a very exaggerated manner. However, when we look beneath the surface, we find that it isn't really real. It is, in fact, cold opportunism in drag. Now, I've been getting into this Joe McCarthy thing, and when I did, I came to realize that I was finding a vast left-wing conspiracy, a conspiracy that takes place in plain sight and that is wide, deep, and dirty. Now, it used to be said that history was written by the victors. Well, today we have another saying, which is the first draft of history is written by journalists. And therefore, in my opinion, history is written by the left. And because history is written by the left, and because I'm so old, I can see their lies as clearly as I see the back of my hand. Now, there was a guy, one of the villains that I'm going to be discussing, by the name of Robert Scheer, ran into David Horowitz. Both of them had been communists when they were young. Robert Scheer's mother lived in a communist commune. She was crazy as an outhouse rat. Anyway, they run into each other, Robert Scheer and David Horowitz, and Scheer says, "Look at you. You support the system and you're struggling, while I attack it and have a six-figure income and a yacht. I am surrounded by Hollywood stars." Okay? Now, that says a lot more about America today than it says about Robert Scheer. America today has been taken over. Not all of it. There's still decent people. But the vast majority of the power positions in this country back around the 1930s during the Depression was taken over. And we have been struggling. It's amazing that America has survived so long with a State Department that is clearly and has been treasonous, with a film industry that tears us up, hates us, loves our enemies. But I'm talking about today journalists. I've told you about Walter Duranty. Back when Stalin was riding high, Duranty was a New York Times columnist. He was considered the expert on Russia. He won the Pulitzer Prize. His articles on how the famine in the Ukraine was a fraud induced FDR to normalize relations with Russia, which was murdering its people by the tens of millions at the time. I told you that the Ukrainians had gone to the New York Times and told them, you can't allow this man to keep his Pulitzer. He was a liar. He's responsible for the deaths of millions of people. And Arthur Pinch Sulzberger, the guy who inherited the New York Times, he wouldn't give it back. He says that would be airbrushing history. What he's saying is, we like it. We like Stalin. We like repression and mass murder and slavery. Now you say, well, that can't possibly be true. I'm sorry. Let me just take the one that I found. God put this in my hand yesterday. I'm going through all my newspaper clippings. The title, it's 95. The title is "Newsman Who Spied for Viet Cong Unrepentant." Pham Xuan Ahn was a consultant to a generation of journalists during the long American involvement in Vietnam. And he was immensely influential. He worked for Time magazine's large bureau, and American reporters valued his insights and opinions. They would have coffee with one another and murmur, Ahn says this or Ahn says that. Well, guess what? We discovered after the war that Ahn was a colonel in the Viet Cong. He was a spy. He was a rotten, backstabbing slimeball. But he says that during the war, this is a quote, he never gave secret military information to the Liberation Front. Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Oh, by the way, when the war was over, the Northerners pushed the National Liberation Front aside. The whole basis of the hippies and their anti-war movement was that it was a civil war. We had nothing to do with it. We should leave it alone. And yet now we find here they were just pushed aside. He says, I didn't have to. He said, the entire American, civilian, and Vietnamese military apparatus was full of Liberation Front sympathizers.
We got like 2 minutes left of the entire show.
All right. I'm simply saying here that after he was arrested, they arrested him because he thought he was working for freedom. And he tried to be free, and they locked him up. And all the news people from America went to support him, and it turns out that they still liked him. Even though he was a traitor to their cause, even though he was a spy, even though he was responsible for thousands of American deaths, hey, good guy.
I'm going to have to go through them real quick. We have 3 stories I was going to talk about. Terrorist attack in London. You heard about
some idiot Arab stabbed an American woman to death.
And they're telling you that, well, they're not sure, though, if it's related to terrorism.
It's just a coincidence that the guy's a Muslim.
Yeah. Story number 2, Queen Hillary. Suddenly Trump's numbers have plummeted, thanks probably to the media. And
Trump, he makes a lot of
CNN
mistakes.
has actually been saying, she's so far ahead, we don't even need to have an election.
They stopped campaigning in Michigan, Virginia, because they figured they got that already.
Meanwhile, Mr. Khan, Khazir Khan, the deep financial connections between Saudi Arabia, Hillary's Clinton Foundation, the corruption that's all connected is ridiculous. And finally, Obama's
the
Iranian
news media, by the way, doesn't report that.
Iranian ransom of $400 million. Suddenly, Iranian hostages released. He said, "Oh, they have nothing to do with each other. It was supposed to be money went to the Shah that never got delivered back, and it's been negotiated since '81. And we finally decided to give them the $400 million. Oh, and these hostages got released at the same time.
Did the Shah ask for unmarked bills?
Yeah, well, there was pallets of cash that was delivered to Iran.
Is that how the Shah was supposed to get it, or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know. He's swearing up and down. It has nothing to do with
the point. Is why would you have unmarked bills?
Well, it goes back
to
what you said a moment ago.
That's so you can give it to the terrorists.
The Democrats lie, the media lies, and then as Dinesh D'Souza says in Hillary's America, deny, deny, deny. That's what they do. All right, plug yourself.
Okay, conservativecannonade.org. If you want to read my 18-page poem that mirrors D'Souza's movie, that's where it is, right there at the end.
Constitution Radio, next week, Charles Wiley, journalist from the Vietnam War. Talk to him. My name is Douglas V. Gibbs, douglasvgibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. God bless America, God bless you, and never forget, united we stand, combined we kick butt. The U.S. Constitution is the solution, and we are done right here on KMET 1490 AM this week, but we will be back next week to continue our discussions about the U.S. Constitution. Great having you. See you then.
Same time, same station, buckaroos.